There's a quiet panic that lives beneath modern life, an anxious, invisible weight we carry without realizing it. It shows up in how we overplan our schedules, in the way we check our phones every few minutes, in the stress we feel when things don't go according to plan. It's the fear of losing control. Somewhere deep inside, we've come to believe that being in control means being safe. That if we just manage things perfectly, our relationships, our finances, our reputation, our health, we can keep pain out and happiness in. But here's the truth, most of us learn the hard way. Control is an illusion. You can't stop the storm. You can't control how others treat you. You can't predict the future no matter how much you prepare. And when that illusion breaks, when life suddenly reminds you how fragile it all is, it can feel terrifying. But what if that breaking point is not a failure? What if losing control is not the beginning of collapse, but the beginning of transformation? The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus, who was born a slave and later became one of the greatest philosophers of his age, taught that freedom begins not in controlling the world, but in controlling our response to it. He said, "Some things are up to us, and some things are not." That simple truth, if fully embraced, changes everything. Suffering for many of us is rooted not in what happens, but in our resistance to what happens. We grasp, we fight, we panic, and in doing so, we often create more pain than the event itself ever would. The myth of control feeds the ego. It tells us we are the center, the master, the architect of our lives. But reality, life itself, keeps humbling us. Illness comes, people leave, plans fall apart, and in that unraveling we are left with only what is real. C.S. Lewis understood this through personal loss. He had once said, "We are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us. We are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be." He knew that control was not the path to peace. Surrender was. But surrender is one of the most misunderstood words in our language. We confuse it with weakness, passivity, giving up. But true surrender is none of these. It is not the end of effort. It is the end of illusion, a reorientation of the heart. Surrender says, I release what I cannot carry. I trust what I do not yet understand. I stop grasping and start listening. And in that space, something remarkable begins to happen. We stop trying to bend the world to our will, and we start aligning with something larger than ourselves. In the next part, we'll explore what surrender really looks like, not as a vague spiritual idea, but as a practice. We'll see how letting go, paradoxically, becomes the very thing that gives you strength, clarity, and peace. What does surrender actually look like in the real world? It's not just a spiritual phrase or poetic idea. It's a daily practicey posture of the soul that says, I am no longer clinging to what is outside of my power. At first, this sounds terrifying. We are so used to gripping everything: relationships, outcomes, reputations, even our image of ourselves. We think if we let go, we'll fall apart, that things will collapse, that we'll lose our identity, our ambition, or our direction. But the opposite happens. When you surrender what you cannot control, you make space for what truly matters. You stop chasing shadows and start walking in truth. You stop exhausting yourself trying to manage life and begin receiving it as it is. This is not laziness or indifference. In fact, surrender takes more strength than control ever did. Control is reactive. It's a constant effort to protect and predict. Surrender is responsive. It's grounded, aware, open. Control is fueled by fear. Surrender is guided by trust. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you choose where to place your care. You stop trying to fix people, and instead you love them freely. You stop trying to plan every step and instead move in wisdom and faith. You stop defining success by outcomes and instead root it in integrity and presence. Think of the trees. In autumn, they surrender their leaves not as a sign of death, but of renewal. They know that holding on would cost them life, so they release, and in the letting go, they prepare for spring. This is how the soul works too. There are things we carry that we were never meant to. Expectations, old wounds, roles we've outgrown. When we cling, we shrink. When we release, we grow. C.S. Lewis, reflecting on grief, wrote, to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. He wasn't glorifying pain, he was naming the cost of a meaningful life. You cannot love and stay in control. You cannot grow and stay safe. You cannot transform and stay unchanged. Surrender is the choice to live with open hands instead of clenched fists. It is the decision to allow what must leave, to accept what must change, and to welcome what is unknown. The mystics called this holy abandonment, not the abandonment of meaning, but of ego, a release of the full self in order to become fully alive. But this is not a one-time event. It's a rhythm, a returning. Every morning, every moment, you choose. Will I grip or will I trust? And the more you choose surrender, the stronger you become. Not in a loud or aggressive way, but in a grounded, unshakable way. The kind of strength that remains calm when plans fall apart. That still loves when the outcome is uncertain. That walks forward when the path is hidden. In the next part, we'll explore how control seduces the modern mind, how our culture, obsession with certainty and dominance has made us spiritually fragile, and how surrender is the antidote. Restores not just inner peace but inner power. To understand why surrender feels so difficult, we have to look at the world we live in. Modern culture is built on the illusion of control. We are constantly fed messages that say, take charge of your destiny, manifest your future, never settle, design your life. At first glance, these sound empowering, and in moderation, personal agency is a gift. But beneath this empowerment language lies a deeper pressure. The belief that if we suffer, if we struggle, if life doesn't go according to our script, it's somehow our fault. We've been taught to believe that control is not only possible, but necessary for happiness. This belief makes surrender feel like failure, like giving up, like letting life win instead of fighting for what we want. But here's the paradox. The more we chase control, the more anxious, rigid, and reactive we become. The more we try to predict everything, the more afraid we are of what we can't. The more we try to fix ourselves, others, and the future, the more fragmented we feel. Control turns life into a battlefield. Every setback becomes a threat. Every delay an injustice. Every emotion a problem to solve. And so, without realizing it, we become at war with reality. Surrender invites us out of that war. But the modern mind, shaped by algorithms, instant gratification, and endless information, resists that invitation. It wants certainty, proof, results. Surrender offers mystery, patience, and presence. It is a language the culture no longer speaks but the soul still understands. This is why many people feel spiritually thirsty but emotionally exhausted. They are drowning in strategies but starved of meaning. They are doing everything right and still feeling empty. The soul was not made for domination, it was made for communion. Communion with truth, with the present, with God, and you cannot enter communion while grasping for control. You have to release. That's why the most powerful spiritual moments often come in weakness, in illness, in grief, in failure. Moments when control is stripped away and something deeper is revealed. We've all seen this. A person who lets go of trying to control others begins to actually love them. A person who stops micromanaging every outcome begins to live with more joy. A person who stops fighting their emotions begins to feel peace. Control may bring comfort, but surrender brings freedom. You don't need to fear life when you're not trying to control it. You don't need to pretend you're fine when you accept that it's okay not to be. You don't need to plan every detail when you trust the one who holds the future. In a culture that idolizes independence, surrender reconnects us to dependence, not on systems, not on certainty, but on something deeper, on divine wisdom, on inner truth, on the guidance that comes when we stop talking long enough to listen. C.S. Lewis wrote, "Relying on God has to begin all over again every day, as if nothing had yet been done." That is surrender, not once, but always. Not weakness, but wisdom. In the next section, we'll explore how to practice surrender in a world built against it, how to live gently and powerfully, even in uncertainty, by developing the inner habits of trust. Surrender is not a single decision, it's a rhythm of living. It doesn't mean we stop planning or caring. It means we stop grasping. It's the difference between holding something in your hands gently and clenching it in your fist. One allows life to flow. The other resists, controls, and so. The question, then, is not simply how do I surrender, but how do I become a person who lives from surrender? The answer begins in the inner life, in the habits, postures, and perspectives that quietly reshape how we show up to reality. The first habit is awareness. You cannot surrender what you're not aware you're gripping. So start by noticing, where in your life do you feel the most tension, the most fear? Where do you keep forcing outcomes, controlling people, or micromanaging emotions? These places are your invitations to let go. Not recklessly but reverently, not with a resignation but with trust. This is where the second habit begins. Trusting what is greater than you. You don't need to have every answer when you believe in the wisdom of the one who does. Whether you call that God, grace, providence, or something sacred, it's the act of remembering, I am not the source of life, but I am held by it. C.S. Lewis once said, there are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind. But that vision only opens when we trust enough to release what we cannot carry. The third habit is slowness. Control thrives on urgency. Surrender flows through stillness. When you slow down your speech, your decisions, your reactions, you create space for clarity. You stop reacting from fear and start responding from wisdom. Slowness lets you listen, and surrender always begins with listening. The fourth habit is non-resistance to emotion. Most of us were taught to suppress what we feel, but emotions are messengers, not enemies. When we surrender to them, not indulge, not obey, but surrender, we let them move through us. We cry, we grieve, we rage, we release. And in doing so, we return to peace. This isn't passivity, it's presence. The soul cannot heal while it's busy pretending. The fifth habit is detachment from outcomes. Do your best, but let go of the result. This is the practice at the heart of Stoicism, Christian contemplation, and countless wisdom traditions. Focus on what is yours to do and release the rest. When you live this way, your inner life changes. You stop fearing failure. You stop controlling others. You stop demanding certainty. You begin to walk lightly. You begin to breathe again. One of the most powerful prayers I've ever written is just 3 words. Thy will be done. Not spoken with defeat but with dignity. With a quiet strength that comes from trusting a greater story. With a peace that comes from knowing that control is not the goal of ours. Surrender is how we come back to love. Again and again. In the next and final part, we'll explore how surrender doesn't make you weak, it makes you radiant. How letting go leads not only to peace, but to the kind of strength the world cannot shake. There is a kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't dominate a room or shout to be heard. It moves quietly, like water carving stone, like roots growing underground. It is the strength of a soul that is surrendered, a soul that no longer fears life's uncertainties, because it has made peace with the truth. I am not in control, but I am held. I do not command the future, but I can be faithful in the present. This strength doesn't come from pretending everything is fine. It comes from walking through the fire and learning that you don't burn, you are refined. The person who surrenders is not weak, they're awake. They see through the illusions. They've stopped trying to fix, force, or fabricate. They've released their need to be right, to be impressive, to be untouchable. They are no longer defending a version of themselves, they are becoming themselves. They've learned that the more you let go, the more your soul begins to shine. Because surrender clears away the clutter, it removes what never belonged. It silences the noise of performance, pride, and fear, and in that silence, your true voice begins to emerge. You become someone others trust not because you have all the answers, but because you're not pretending. You become someone who brings peace not because you control the chaos, but because you've made peace with your own. You become someone who is gentle with pain because you've stopped running from your own. This is the gift of surrender. It doesn't erase your story, it redeems it. It doesn't take your strength, it transforms it. These are the marks of one who has let go, not of responsibility but of illusion, not of desire but of demand, not of love but of the need to manage it. You are not the center of the universe, and what freedom there is in finally admitting that. You can rest, you can trust, you can breathe again. C.S. Lewis wrote, "The real problem of the Christian life comes where people do not usually look for it. It comes the very moment you wake up each morning. All your wishes and hopes for the day rush at you like wild animals. And the first job each morning consists simply in shoving them all back, listening to that other voice, taking that other point of view, letting that other larger, stronger, quieter life come flowing in. That larger, stronger, quieter life is what surrender makes room for. It is not a life free from pain but a life free from fear, not a life without hardship but a life with purpose. This is where true power lies, not in control, but in communion with the moment, with the people around you, with God. This is the invitation. Stop grasping, stop spinning, stop performing, and begin again. Open your hands, loosen your jaw, drop your shoulders, breathe deeply. Say it out loud if you must. I release what is not mine to carry. Because when you finally let go, you don't fall, you rise. You rise into a life that is not forced, but formed. Not managed, but meaningful. Not armored, but alive. You don't have to control everything. You only have to be here fully, gently, honestly, and that is enough. That is more than enough.